Hi, it's Zena Krogadal, your American Dream Makers host. I am so glad you could join us today, and I have such a wonderful guest. I met her at a Entre Institute Insight conference, and she is a fabulous woman. Linda Cha is amazing. Cannot wait to introduce her, but wait, let me play my intro video, and we will get started. Here we go. Hi, it's Zena Krogadal, your American Dream Makers host. I am back, and Linda Cha is our guest today. And let me tell you, she is an American Dream Maker, and she has an amazing story. Let me just tell you, Linda Cha has turned adversity into opportunities and wants to help others do the same. And as a Hmong American, Linda understands the challenges of maintaining her Hmong roots while chasing her dreams and becoming her own person. She's a mother of two, balancing the challenges of life's day-to-day activities and overcoming adversity is something she is. And so, without further ado, here is Linda. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Zena.
How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on on your show today.
Oh, I'm so glad that you were able to take time out of your extremely busy schedule because I know you are extremely busy. So, really grateful to you for being here. So, Linda, we met at the Entre Institute Insight event back in January. And that was a really amazing event and packed in with a lot of fun. And it definitely was well appropriately named Insight. So, so I'm just so glad that I have you in my circle of friends now. So it's just beautiful. So tell us about yourself. Tell us where you live. Tell us where you're from. Just give us a background of who Linda Cha is.
Yeah, no, thanks, Zena. Insight was a phenomenal. It's always a great experience. I always get to meet amazing people like yourself, and so yeah, definitely really glad we got a chance to connect there. Is in regards to who I am and where I'm from, well, I consider myself a Hmong American woman. I was born in the United States, but my parents migrated here from Laos in the late 70s. So we settled in Minnesota, not initially, but that's where we settled in for as far as home goes. So I was born in Minnesota, a Minnesota native, and lived there for most of all my life. I left a little bit for about a decade to Chicago and came back. But this is my hometown, and this is got a large Hmong community here in the metro area. So it's just too hard hard to stay away from community at times. So here I am back from Chicago. It's been about 3 years now.
Awesome. Well, my husband's on here, Chris. It's nice to see and hear Linda because I've talked about you. So
Oh, hi, Chris.
Um, and by the way, anybody who is on here, please go ahead and give StreamYard permission, and that way we can see your comments. And we would love to see your comments. So if you're on here, give us a shout out. And also, please go ahead and share this because Linda has an amazing story, and we definitely want to make sure people hear this. So, yeah, so definitely if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook and give permission, we'll get to see the name as it pops up. So, okay, go. Continue, Linda. So that was awesome that you were born in Minnesota?
I
Or
was
did you
born in, yep, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
so what was it like growing up? Hi there. You got a friend.
Hi, Samani. She's one of my old students. Uh,
Oh, how awesome.
so, growing up in Minnesota it was a, gosh, having to really actually think about it. Um, I want to say it was a great place to grow up because my community was so dense, and I always felt like I had family and friends nearby. Still feel like that today. Walk out the door and There's always somebody, and in the monk community where we always kid around that, in our community it's not 6 degrees of separation, it's really more like 2 degrees. And so everybody knows everyone, and so sometimes that's good and bad. But I grew up in South Minneapolis, right off of 31st and Lake Street. And so that would be, if any of you are familiar with the George Floyd incident, it wasn't far from there. So that is, maybe a mile and a half, two from there. So that's my stomping ground. That's where I grew up, in South Minneapolis. And, my family grew up very, very poor. Both of my parents were immigrants when they came over, and so it's just, this show, The American Dream Makers. I know you and I chatted a little bit about, what this is really about, and being immigrants or products of, immigrants, and how do you build your dream through that, when I feel like the challenges and the setbacks are much, much greater than most people could understand when you're not from an immigrant, background.
Yeah,
So
unpack that a little bit for us.
I'm sorry.
Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I don't talk much about this actually, but I probably should, because it's just so much of my story. But I think I've worked so long and so hard to really change my mindset around poverty. But and so a lot of times I don't speak about it anymore. But if, and just having to really reflect on this question, I definitely have to say that, growing up in poverty was something that I remember very sharply in my memory, as far as just how we grew up, where we grew up, the resources that we had, or the lack thereof. I mean, our family, I come from a huge family. I've got, I grew up with 8 siblings, and 6 half brothers and sisters. And like a bazillion cousins. And so so like love always felt very centered, but resources were always very limited. And so growing up in South Minneapolis, I remember my dad he used to nail in like 2x4s into our windows, so that to keep people out, because we lived in a pretty bad neighborhood, and gunshots were just part of the nightly routine. And so, and my mom was a farmer, and because that's how she had to provide for us, all 9 of us. And she barely read or wrote, and I think her education level was up to 3rd grade. So it wasn't, I mean, we didn't grow up in that typical household where it was, we had soccer practice, and band practice, or, you had those opportunities. No, our family was really more focused on, hi, Dundee, was really more focused on just learning how to survive, like putting food on the table, learning how to survive. And then my parents would always reiterate, like, get an education. But it was just so hard to focus on education. It was hard to focus on, really excelling when you go to school hungry, or you're learning how to navigate this world and speaking 2 languages. And so yeah, so growing up was, when I think about it, like the love was plentiful, and the community is really rich. But definitely when I think about academics and just growing up and comparing my life to even my own children's life today, very different. And I got married really young too. So I was only 14 years old when I got married. And so I was just going into the 9th grade. I got married in the summer of 94. I was going into my high school years. And I just remember it feeling so weird, in the sense where, like, I felt like I had to really hide who I was, because I didn't want well, my parents were telling me, like, well, don't tell anybody at school, because you'll get in trouble. You're underage. And so I'd never said anything to any of my educators or teachers. But, it was weird going to school that year, and just knowing, like, I couldn't talk, the dating scene was obviously totally off, whatever that meant. And just, like, being in high school and wanted to explore all these things, but then also being, married and going home to this cultural marriage, that is just, it was, it's not your regular all American, story. I started working right when I was 14 because I had to provide for myself. And so, although I was very academic in high school and I would, make sure I finished all my studies, as soon as that bell rang, almost every day, unless I was sick or had other plans, I was taking that city bus to my job at night, and I'd work and till 9, 10 o'clock or however late they needed me to, and then I'd come home and study and get up and do it all over again. And so I wasn't it didn't, like I said, didn't have that traditional kind of upbringing. I've been learning. I've had to work basically since I was little, since my mom was working the farm, and we would go and pick pickles, or cucumbers, little baby cucumbers to survive and to feed our family and to pay for all the new clothes that my mom needed to purchase or make with her sewing machine that next year. So that's a little bit about me and my upbringing.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that because that is, like you said, it's not a typical story, but I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, so why did you get married at the age of 14?
So it wasn't a forced marriage by any means. It was really more uh, just the norm for us, believe it or not. Because in Thailand and in Laos, where Hmong people, a lot of Hmong people live, young marriages is very normal. And so with my parents coming to the United States in '76, and I was born in '79, so it was just a matter of 3 years. So those cultural roots were still very, very strong. And so a lot of Hmong girls at that time were getting married at a young age just because it was just what we knew.
A
So
and did you marry another Hmong young man?
I did.
And how
Yes.
old was he?
So he was 17.
Okay.
Yes. So you can imagine like two kids basically getting married.
And finishing up high school.
Yes.
So did you live with your parents then?
No. So traditionally, as soon as the bride gets married, she has to live with the husband's family. From an ancestral standpoint and whatnot, it's just that's kind of how our culture is. But so yeah, so I moved in with his family, and um, he's the youngest of seven too. So we just roomed up, pretty much bunked up with his parents for a couple of years.
Okay, wow. And so you had children together as well? When did you start having kids?
Yeah, we did. So we have two boys, and I was pregnant with my first, like, right as my senior year was ending. So I was 18 when I got pregnant.
And by that time, were you telling your peers, that you were married? I mean, I guess at what point did you share that?
So I never did. Actually, the only people that I did share it with were my other Hmong peers because they had already known, that whole 2 degrees of separation. Everybody already knew that we were married. So the only teacher that knew was my Spanish teacher, actually, because um, I got pregnant when I was 16. I That one didn't make it, but I got really sick, and so I had to confide with my Spanish teacher just because I was failing some of my classes because I got pretty sick, and so she was really the only one, and that knew about my story. But yeah, and she was really encouraging. I remember her telling me that she's like, you can. It's like it's very it lines up so great with even your message. She looked at me and she said, you can be anything you want to be in this world. Um, even though you got married young, you can be anything you want to be. I still remember her pulling me into the hallway and sharing that message with me because I think she could just tell that I was really struggling because I mean, married at 14 was no walk in the park at all. So it was, you throw in the colliding cultures with you've got your cultural differences at home with your parents, and then now you're married at 14 and you're trying to go to you do this whole American girl thing, and it just wasn't it was challenging for sure. So navigating those two different worlds. And that's part of the reason why I started to do the work that I did, is because putting myself back into that 14-year-old mindset and body and experience, I always go back and think, gosh, if I knew then what I know now, right? We always say that to ourselves, but more importantly, like if I had the support and the resources that I did, how different of a person would I be today? And so that's why I started doing a lot of programming within the education field, and working a lot with at-risk youth and educators in building these types of really more cultural leadership niche type programs that will really help kids set them up in a different way.
That is just beautiful that you saw the need for the Hmong community, the young kids growing up in it, because that is a challenge. Because I grew up first generation as well. I was born in Vietnam, but I was just a year old when I came. But the struggle was definitely same thing. My parents had just immigrated, so they were very deep in their cultural roots. But yet here I am, an American child living in an American culture, and so to try to pair the two together doesn't always mesh as you experienced, doesn't always mesh together the way our parents saw in their minds.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure, right? In cultural pressures that I know that, when I was in school and going to school with my, American friends, we weren't having the same conversations, right? We weren't sharing the same struggles. And I wish that, and a lot of times I wish we were, in the sense where I wish my problems were about boys and going to the mall and doing this and that. But for us, it was like I was writing checks out, paying bills because my mom didn't know how to read, and I was translating documents for her because, again, they didn't know how to read. And so, and this is not, I'm not unique in that sense. There's many, many other minority, women or just, minor products of immigrants, right? That children of immigrants that they can tell the same story. I'm sure you have some that you could share as well.
Yes, yeah. Well, yes, but my upbringing was a little different. I grew up in Flagstaff, and there wasn't a whole lot of Vietnamese or Asian community to begin. It was mostly predominantly Caucasians with a few minorities in a very small town. Um, and so it was a little different in that I didn't even have the community, the Vietnamese community
Mhm.
around me that I really stood out like a sore thumb. Let's just put it that way. So I really love hearing that you had such a source of, at least you had the community, the Hmong community, and you had friends who understood some of
Yes.
what you were going through. So tell us about what that was like, just having that close knit community like that, and with the struggles or with the things that you struggled together, probably in some similar fashion. How was that helpful? And then maybe how did that hold you back even, you know?
Sure, yeah. No, I definitely think it was definitely a win, on all parts, as far as just having that support and those friendships, and, going to school and seeing people who look like you and knowing that, some of their struggles are similar, and just having that common ground was just so helpful for me to, we could talk about so many things that were relatable and lean on each other for support even when things are going bad, because just like anything in this world, you even if you have a fantastic community, there's still going to be struggles even within the community, right? And the culture itself too. And so, although it may not be perfect, but there were a lot of things that really supported me in becoming who I am today. And I owe a lot of that to my community, and even in this most silent ways, like when we're a big community, we're really big on gatherings, especially if we're doing like spiritual gatherings, and like funerals are a big ordeal. A lot of people come all over the place to show their support. Support does definitely look different in our community. It's always encouraged to go and say, oh, so and so's family, even though they're not related, they did this and this for us, and they're going through a hard time. Go see them, or go support one of their events or something like that. And so although that can take up a lot of time because it feels like every weekend there's something going on, But having that support, you know, where you can call somebody up, or you just understand, like, you know, the cultural challenges that we're going through together is, you know, it to me, I felt like it's uplifted our community in a lot of different ways. And it still continues to do that today. I mean, we've assimilated quite a bit, and you know, there's little different pockets that you know, people live in and whatnot, and people, you know, as our community grows, just like any community, you know, you're going to have those different separations and pockets of interest in people. And so I see that happening now, but I'm still very grateful that, you know, even the work that, like, say I do within the education field, I get to work primarily with Hmong kids and educators. And so that helps me stay connected and feel like I'm giving back to my community as well.
Uh, that's beautiful. I'm so glad you shared that for sure. Uh, so as you grew up and you're talking about how your teenage years was not the typical American teenage years, you were married and you had your first child at the age of 18, it sounds right? 18, 17,
I was
18,
pregnant at 18 and then had him at 19.
19. Okay. And so you were a mom and just starting life. And so I guess what happened after that? Did you go to college? What were your dreams, hopes and dreams? What was going on at that time in your life?
Yeah, yeah. So being such a young mom, I knew right out of high school that I had to make money. You know, I had to learn how to make a living, um, and I needed to do it quickly because I was having my first child, and then my second, Caleb, was born in just 2 years later, 18 months actually later. So I did not have, although I wanted to go to college right after, I knew and I did. I went for 2 semesters, I believe, and I just couldn't do it with the newborn and, you know, working full time. It wasn't in the cards for me. So I took you know, I think my entire mantra in my life is untraditional. Like everything I do is untraditional. So you know, I worked. My family started a brokerage, and I went to work for them, and then, you know, just kind of did a part-time school at night. So I did the untraditional route. It took me about 10 years to get my undergrad, but I did finally get it. But in the meantime, you know, I was in and out and working, building my career within the mortgage lending field. So I've been in mortgage lending now for 25 years and pretty much have done almost everything under the sun. And so that, you know, so that's kind of that's a, you know, a summary of kind of where I went with my career. But in, gosh, I think 2001, um, I, a manager of mine saw a lot of potential in me, and you know, she heard about this class, one that it's very similar to Insight. And I was really young back then. I think I was only 22, 23 years old. But by that time, because I had been working right out of high school, I was already, you know, in a career type position, and so working as a project manager. And so she, you know, she pulled me to the side and say, you know, and she said, you know, I think you should really consider, you know, going to this class and taking it, as you know. And I was so desperate to learn, and I think that's just been a quality of mine ever since, you know, like, as long as I can remember. I love to learn. And so, you know, and coming from a trusted source too, like my managers, I was right. I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I went and, you know, spent, at that time, it was 4 days. And it completely changed my life, and really more so around my mindset. And although, you know, I feel like that word now gets thrown around so much, um, but it's a lot easier said than done, right? Like, to really shift your mindset, especially when you come from like deep rooted, you know, thought processes, like with immigrant parents who have a completely different mindset and didn't even grow up in the same country, and their core values and belief systems are entirely different than most of those that you'll find in the United States. And so, but nonetheless, you know, even after that, I took the class, and that's when I really started my journey, my self-discovery journey of what's possible for me. And that year, after I finished the second advanced class, I doubled my income, and I was young and naive, when you were still like willing to jump in and make those risks, take those risks. That's what I did. I took a lot of the concepts that I learned in the classes that I took, and I said, well, if this stuff really works, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. And so I knew I wanted to make more money, and I knew I wanted to do something different with my life. And so I actually put together this like job description of what I wanted, the whole like manifestation thing that people talk about. That even sometimes people are like, well, is that a real thing? And, I really put it to the test, and I manifested a job that wasn't even there. And so that year, I went from making 42,000, and I think I W-2'd somewhere in the ballpark of 90. So I doubled my income that young, and that's when I really believed in the power of manifestation, and I really started to adopt these concepts, and understand like how does somebody really change their mindset, to create the life that they really want, right? Because that whole definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that was me. And I would look over at my mom and my dad and many of my relatives, and no knock on them, but it was like I could see it happening over and over again, that if I wanted a different outcome for myself, I had to do some things differently. And so I really took it and ran, especially after I did the third level of the leadership course. That's when I came back. And when I finished that course, it was about probably 2007, maybe 2006. I accidentally fell in, and somebody said, one of my very good friends, Pang, who you met her at Insight, Pang,
Yes, yeah.
another powerhouse that you should definitely have her on the show. She we've known each other for years, but that's when she pulled me in and said, she's just like, I don't know what you're doing, but like, can you come help these girls? Because I was married young and struggling, and they, I don't know, they weren't married, but they were struggling at home with the colliding cultures and whatnot. And so I started this, I pro bono for, I was doing work for a friend or helping a friend, and um, grew this program. First started off with like 25 girls, and then we went into, the boys wanted to come, and we had over 100 kids in the program, and then it grew into 3 schools, and and then all of a sudden here we are, and it was all because of these tools that I was teaching the kids, and just really challenging them to be their best, and to challenge their thought processes, and challenge how they think and why. And so some of those kids are just, I'm still great friends with them today. They've become, Nelsie Yang is one of my um, students that she started with me ever since she was in 7th grade. And she's the youngest Hmong woman, city councilwoman on the east side of St. Paul. And so, just being able to see these kids flourish and become their own, but also understanding how important it is to maintain your cultural roots through that process, and that what the kids are facing at school versus what they're facing at home aren't necessarily always, the same. And a lot of times those kids are not even explaining or sharing at school what's happening, because that's just, sometimes it's not that it's hush hush, but it's just cultural differences, of what's expected and what is normal. And so, and I do feel like, we've shifted the needle quite a bit even in that aspect as a community, but there are still struggles. You ask anybody who grows up in colliding cultures, and you'll see that there's going to be different challenges. And so it's been really rewarding, and now we're in working directly with educators. So before we're working with students, and, not only teaching them and these concepts through the program, I took them to all these different parts of the country. But now we're working directly with educators. So, we're kind of hitting it from the top and the bottom. And that's what I'm really excited about, because when you're filling up the cups of those educators as well, on top of, and then the kids the students are already living it, it's just going to be a better place for them to really thrive. And so yeah, I feel like I've said a whole mouthful, but I don't know if that answered your
Oh,
question.
it was great because you gave us such in-depth, details, which is wonderful because it helps us to understand, what you've been through and what you're doing right now, and you obviously have such a passion for it. And honestly, sitting here listening to you, I wish there was somebody that could have helped me through,
Mhm.
maintaining my culture, not being embarrassed about my culture,
Exactly.
and yet still being an American girl, and that was okay too. But as you know, that the two cultures colliding, we have identity issues 10 times, probably more than the normal average teenage kid does, right? So,
You got it. You
and
got it.
yeah, and so it took me decades to work through a lot of those quote unquote issues to try to find my identity and my voice because I didn't know, it was always a struggle. Like you're right, you couldn't share with a lot of your peers because they didn't understand. Because the advice that they would give you, you're like, yeah, I can't just go and express that to my parents. You have no idea.
Exactly. You got it. Yep. Yep. And not only that, but I feel like like you just said it, like it took you decades to figure that out. And I think for me, I was so fortunate that I ran into these classes, and that it really helped challenge and shake up, like essentially it shook up my nervous system to the point where I was like, I made a decision, like this wasn't okay for me. I didn't want to live my life like that. And so, and then I felt obligated, and not in a way where it's bad, but I just felt this, extreme responsibility to share this with other people. Because if it could change my life and make me better, oh gosh, like especially with the kids. And I think because I always revert back to that 14-year-old girl that got married, and I just remember being in the struggle of so many things. Like I didn't know where my next dollar was going to come from. Being 15, 16 years old, like how are we supposed to fill our tank? Now our car's broken. Like, how am I supposed to fix that? And I didn't have any parental support in terms of, my mom she was in no position to support me, and so I'm here married, having to figure this whole life thing on my own. And I'm grasping at the straws for anything, and I just remember just like, oh, gosh, like there's no way I could focus on even being a great student, or like how can I even focus on building college. Like what would that even look like for me when I can't even, I'm worried about what I'm going to eat tomorrow. I'm worried about how I'm going to get to school, and like how am I going to fill my tank and pay for my insurance bill, and just the list goes on. And being so young, I think I was like in this constant anxiety panic attack mode of you know how do I make it. And it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot of grit. It taught me, how to be resourceful. And also, I realized how much my scarcity mindset, how embedded that was in me. And just remembering, like, if I ever want to get out of this, or even, be more, like, I had to really challenge myself to grow and think differently. And again, like always, it's so much easier said than done, right? Like every level that you get to, every layer of skin that you need to shed, it's not a fun process. And not a lot of people are willing to go through it because it's painful, but I've learned so much about myself, and I've learned, I've also, it's given me that very profound, and um, just, just that heart to, like, I need to I need to give that back to others as well. So,
Uh, Amazing, just amazing, and I'm glad you touched on that it is painful to go through the layers of change, but there's pain that damages and then there's pain that heals,
mm,
right? And so I think sometimes we think of pain and we just think our mind, it's a mindset thing. Our mind automatically thinks of it's a pain that's going to be bad.
mhm,
But instead of realizing that there's pain that actually heals and grows, and to have the courage to embrace it. And like you said, thankfully you had some great mentors and people to encourage you in it. And I love that you feel a duty and an obligation, a responsibility to help those who you know are struggling with the same things and having them to just come out of that at a younger age so they don't have to
Mhm.
spend decades.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. You got it.
Yeah, that's just beautiful. And I have to tell you, when I met you ladies at Insight, there was something very um, infectious about all of you guys, being together and just laughing and conversing. And I could tell from the outside looking in, you guys really were more than just friends. You really looked at each other as family, and you probably had been through and grown a lot. And so that was a very beautiful thing to see. And it really was like that movie, The Joy Luck Club, when you kind of, watch that and that endearing friendships, and that you have different personalities and different likes and desires, but really you had such a common bond and a deep bond, um, which is why, I'm definitely excited to see, when you get your show going with the 5 ladies. I think it's just going to be awesome.
Yeah, they keep staying on, on me for that. Um,
Oh, Linda, you are such an inspiration. Ask her, who does the look, does she look currently for leadership and inspiration? So who do you look currently for leadership and inspiration?
so I thanks for putting me on the spot, Chai. He's a podcast guy too, so he knows how to ask good questions. So currently, I am doing a lot of work around the culturally responsible leadership framework and teaching framework, because I work so much with students and educators. But I do a lot of my work with, like I follow Todd Campbell. He's definitely my mentor, Chief Transformation Officer of Entra, and does a lot of this work. And so I study directly under him. And I read all the books with, Tony Robbins, and Jim Rowe. He's a big one of mine as well. And Marshall Thurber. He's a great guide when it comes to leadership as well. So, but right now I'm really focusing on the culturally responsive framework, and just reading a lot of books on those leaders in the education field and how they're leading students and educators through change, and in a format that is focused on the student centered learning, versus the traditional the traditional setting.
Awesome. And Todd is pretty amazing. He definitely is very gifted. And so I'm glad to hear that he's out of retirement, because
Yeah. It'd be such a take from the world.
it really would be. And it looks like he's enjoying it. So really, really grateful for that, for sure. And I'm excited to go through more of his programs as well. Hi there. Hi, Ray. Thanks you guys so much for your comments. And yeah, absolutely. If you got any other questions for Linda, definitely put it in the chat. Yeah. And so with all of those things, you've put together a curriculum. Is that correct?
Yes,
A program. And
correct.
so you work with students, and then you work with educators, but mainly educators now,
Both.
correct?
We do a combination of both equally, to be honest. And so oftentimes they'll bring us in with educators, and we'll do a 3-5 day training with them, and follow-up sessions, and then also bring programming directly into schools, and that would serve the kids. So I've been doing both of that.
So now, are these schools all over Minneapolis, St. Paul,
They're all
Minneapolis?
they're in the metro area. So some in, Brooklyn Park, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Okay, great.
We're all
And so
over.
they're not just Hmong schools. They're all over the areas that have Hmong students and
That's correct.
teachers.
Some are Hmong specific schools in the sense where it's, like a Hmong charter school, but we also work with large districts like Minneapolis and Osseo.
That's amazing, Linda, that this all started out, with just you learning. and growing
Mhm.
and at an earlier age, and then you being able to implement that because somebody asked you to come help, and now look at how it's grown uh, into the area. That's phenomenal,
Thank
truly.
you. Thank you. It's, it kind of happened on accident, to be honest. With, but, and also like when you talk about our conversation about shedding skin, like I think about when I left my corporate job. So I was a senior vice president of enterprise risk for a Fairway independent mortgage. And I remember the only other position on top of that or above that is a chief risk officer. And I remember like my third year there, and just thinking and reflecting and realizing that like I didn't want this. If I had to read my obituary right now, I didn't want that to be the main focus. Like, don't get me wrong, I was really proud of my achievements and, working as a senior vice president and managing all these cool projects and initiatives and, having all the span of control and all those things sound wonderful, and not to say that I didn't work extremely hard to get there, but once I got there, I realized like it was somewhat of an empty shell for me in the sense where it didn't serve any of my passions. It didn't, and like, reflecting like if my obituary was to be read today, like what do I want it to say? And so and that's when I made the decision to transition out of my corporate role and build my own leadership company. And it's, even then was that process alone. Oh my God. I would have to say that's probably one of the hardest processes I've been through. The transformation through that, like not getting a regular paycheck, redefining like my relationship with money. Like, what does that mean? How does that look like? What truly is valuable to me in my life when I look back and then like the building process itself, like I've been reading, I actually just finished The E-Myth. I don't know if you've read that book or not, but it's a phenomenal book and really talks a lot about like what being an entrepreneur really means in terms of like really finding that creative side of you and um, tapping into your imagination, but also the creation of it, right? So like the manifestation piece, like that's the beauty of becoming an entrepreneur is, it sounds great. You can, yeah, work your own hours and set your own, whatever, your rates and do all that great stuff. But if you really immerse yourself into being an entrepreneur, you'll realize like you have a lot of room for imagination and you transform yourself and then and like taking that work on to say okay, well, how do I go and manifest those things? Some of those things you have to do from, I know this, you have to create it from thin air. So it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to create this program and go and work with these kids or educators, like what am I doing, and how do I do this and how do I cater to my clients and who am I, as far as like what values do I stake my life on that I'm offering, the service to my clients. And so so that alone within itself has been a really rewarding process. I'm nowhere near where I want to be, or or even hope to be. But Sunisa Lee said it best. She's the first Hmong American Olympian, gymnast Olympian. I was listening to her speech, and she said, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great."
Mm.
And and as hesitant as I was to leave my cushy corporate role, and knowing that I could in a couple of years I could be sitting in a chief risk officer role, um, letting go of those dreams, and really attaching yourself to the American dream, which is essentially to create something meaningful for yourself, and something that you've created based upon your vision, your values, your purpose. It's not an easy task. So, but it's
No.
been so rewarding.
Not easy at all, and, I wanna put this up here too, so anybody that wants to know more about Linda, absolutely go to her website, lindacha.com, and they can also get a hold of you there as well too, right? Your
Correct.
contact is all there?
Yep. Yep.
Wonderful,
You got it.
wonderful. Um, and I just love with, oh, Ray says that she agrees with you on that, the obituary. I was going to say, I love that you had mentioned that that's the thought that went through your head was, what will my obituary say? basically, what will people remember me by? And
Exactly.
then you reverse engineered it, which is what we teach, in business coaching, right? What is your end goal? And then you reverse engineer it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, working under Todd too, one of the questions that he always asks me is, what do you want to experience and what do you want to feel? Right? So, because if you allow yourself to have those two things lead your decision making process, right? Especially when it comes to things that are really important to you, what do you want to experience and what do you want to feel? And so when I think about working with educators and working with kids and building these programs, like I knew that I wanted to make a difference. I want to make an impact, and I want to walk away knowing that like I was able to influence someone's life.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. Oh, what a great beginning of your story. The best is only yet to come. That's for sure. Thanks, Chang. Uh, that is for sure. And yeah, you have a lot of life to live for sure. And that's why you probably feel like you haven't arrived yet, because I honestly don't think that we'll ever really feel that way if we are continuously wanting to grow, because there's always something new to learn. Until we take our last breath, I think there's just always something.
oh, absolutely. 100%. And I feel like one thing that I've learned on this journey of entrepreneurship is that when you're providing the value that people either need or want, um, you will constantly evolve. Like I never in a million years thought I would have to think about curriculum or writing it or, like how do I, or scaling this on a larger scale to, all cultures across the country, not just the Hmong community, right? And so when you think about those things, it's like, well, I don't even know how to do any of that. But that's the beauty in it, and and that's what I've learned through a lot of the work that I've done is like it will show up. The resources that you need will show up if your intentions are clear. Your mechanisms will appear, and the right people will be put in place for those things to come to fruition. Just because the universe knows that it's needed. You know, they know that that service, that support, that help, that impact is absolutely needed. And so yeah, I'm excited. I mean, we'll be working with some kids and bringing them to back to their home country, where they're gonna get an opportunity to really get in touch with their true identity, but also do a lot of this work that I've been doing. And they're going to be leading the project. And so I'm really excited about where this is headed.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm excited to kind of watch this unfold for you, because it's just exciting to see this next chapter, next step for you. It's been very inspirational to hear your story and how you have arrived to doing what you're doing, and you are making a huge difference. So, I mean, just major applause to you for having the courage and the bravery to step out and do it, because that's what holds a lot of us back, is being fearful. We fear, what will our parents think? What will, my aunts and uncles, what will and especially in an Asian culture, that's huge. What they all think is huge.
Most definitely. Yeah. I also do executive coaching too and performance coaching because I did that at my job at Fairway as well. But in working with a cohort of women in my last cohort of clients, that's oftentimes what I hear. Is just how do I get to that breakthrough? How do I defy all the odds? How do I live in a world of possibility versus versus probability? And that's it takes time, to unravel those things and commitment, like true commitment. And so yeah, I'm very blessed. I wake up feeling very blessed that I don't have to, I don't have that conversation in my head anymore about like, oh my gosh, how do I get out of my 9 to 5 job? I've been able to create it, as well. Yeah, I would love to expand to California, for sure. Once we package a curriculum that is that's scalable, that we can duplicate it, we're definitely looking at California because we actually are the nonprofit that I sit on called Minnesota J-Shaw, which is run by Pang. She has an entire coalition of teachers from all across the U.S. and a lot from the Fresno and Sacramento area too. So that's an area that we will definitely be looking at.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. Sulan.
Sue was with us at Insight as well.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's another powerhouse that you'll need on with her.
they are, yeah, all the ladies that were Insight were all powerhouses for sure. That I definitely, when I go out to Minnesota to visit family, I definitely wanna get together with all of you ladies because, like I said, your energy was just, very infectious. Thank you, Chai. Yes, for
Yeah,
sure. Thank
thanks,
you,
Jai.
Amanda, for all that you do.
Most definitely. And yeah, and thank you too, Zena. Like it's when you definitely have a home here when you come to Minnesota. There'll be a lot of us waiting for you with open arms. We'll take you to all the best restaurants and
I'm excited because
thank
I definitely
you.
want all the best restaurants. I want all the best, Asian foods, the best pho, the
Yeah,
best.
that's right. We'll take you to the Hmong market.
Awesome. Oh, can't wait, can't wait. So as we wrap it up, because I know you've got so much, going on, you obviously are just a powerhouse in doing so many awesome things. Oh, yes, you definitely need to come Prescott too, although I have to say, we won't be able to take you to a lot of Asian restaurants
That's
because you're
okay.
in Minnesota, but we can take you to other ones.
I eat everything, so
That is something that Prescott is lacking is definitely the Asian, flair, but that's okay. Maybe one day.
we'll bring
But
the flair there.
there, yes, there you go. But I do wanna give you the opportunity to maybe share from your heart. I mean, you obviously have been through a lot of, trials, a lot of adversities, and a lot of and taken a lot of time to really take a deep look, at who you are and becoming who you are today. So out of all of the experiences that you've had, what would you say you are most grateful for?
Oh, as hard as it was to get married at 14, that experience was it taught it taught me a lot about what I'm capable of. Every time I fell down, which was a lot, like it was one of those situations where it was just the odds were against me all the time. Down to who I married and when I married, and just so many different obstacles. But it really taught me grit. So even through my children, learning so much about what unconditional love is. My career and all the great achievements I've had they're fantastic too. Don't get me wrong, but just really the experiences that I took away from the most that really shaped my character were those hard times that I went through. You know, picking pe- Picking cucumbers in the field, remembering. I actually have a memoir that I've been writing that's called Moments of Shade that talks a lot about that. That working out in the beaten sun, and then there's a tree in the middle of the field, and it's in like that one moment of shade where you get like for me, where I was able to take a step back and appreciate not only the shade but like look at my environment and realize like there's so much work to do here. I can't keep going. I can't stop. I have to keep going and I look back and I see my mom and my siblings working equally as hard to put food on the table. And that image just it really it it created a part of me that it made me who I am today. And then that kind of just rolled right into being married at such a young age, and all the pressures of being a bride and figuring out who I was at such a young age, and trying to find out like how my thought process and what I think, and then on top of that all the cultural challenges. And so but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It definitely has made me who I am today.
I am so thrilled that you shared that part because that is something that I think sometimes people have a lot of regrets, from their past. But I love that you say that you actually are grateful for all of those things because that helped shape you into the person you are today. Because I've had to go through the same thing. If I had to do it all over again, would I make the same choices?
Mhm.
And and honestly, when you go down that road, or when I've gone down that road, I definitely have said the same thing. I wouldn't change it because I wouldn't be who I am today had I not gone through those experiences. Um,
Exactly.
you know, because so that's just perfect for you to share that, and that is part of the American dream maker. Is I think really being able to embrace the history of ourselves. So if we can learn to embrace the history of who we are and how we came to be, I think we can learn and grow and be better. And that goes for personal, that goes for our business, that goes for our country, that goes for all of that. If we can just embrace the history, the past, and not be ashamed of it, but learn
Right.
and grow from it.
Absolutely. Like I would have to say, if anyone asked me, like, what is my number one challenge every day? Like, what's the most challenging thing for me every single day? And you would think that, being an entrepreneur, you're like, oh, well, it's managing my business, or, how do I get more clients? Or, and although those things are important, but the most challenging thing for me every day is just to live more authentically every day. Because it's like, okay, did I express myself? Did I express my truth today? Did I live in my truth? Like the four agreements, like, am I congruent? Am I in alignment with what I believe in and what I say? Because it's sometimes it's not as easy as well, I'll speak for myself. Growing up so young and being married so young and having that mask on, it was hard to take that off and be okay with living in my truth all the time. And so I would say that, that's, if I had to part, and leave anybody with any encouraging words, it would be that, is that the journey is not about, you know, the final destination. It is truly about, like, finding who you are more and more every day and expressing that truth in everything that you do, whether it's through your family, your work, your friendships, on a podcast like this, where I get to share my story again and just understand, like, there is no shame of where you come from. So
Yeah. Very beautiful. Thank you again so much, Linda, for joining us today. You truly are an American dream maker. So keep making those dreams come true. And gosh, keep up the good work and just love it. So uh,
definitely.
we'll say
Thank,
goodbye for now, but that's
all
just for
right.
now. So
That's all right. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Zena.
it was my pleasure. This was a lot of fun. So really enjoyed it. All
Me
right.
too. Me
Take
too.
care.
You too.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining today. That was such an amazing story of accomplishments and just becoming, someone from, having such a hard past. So, you guys, please share this out, share this with your audience because that's just an amazing message. People need to hear it. It's so inspiring. And if you are not part of American Dream Makers, please be sure to join the group. And then you can also, if you like the content, like my page, Zena Krogadal. I'm also on YouTube and LinkedIn. So have a wonderful Friday. I'd love to chat with you and see how you guys are making the American dream come true. So have a wonderful day. Be blessed, be fruitful, and multiply.